Welcome to today's session of Living Abroad with Ms. Judy Francis. And Judy, you have the floor.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Glad to see you. If I'm not, will their voices be loud?
I think so,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
But you might need to repeat if they have any questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll start out. Well, you know my name. And it's a series of eight sessions. You have a question?
We're not supposed to, we're letting.
Sorry. Okay. Little housekeeping question here. You know, it's Living Abroad, Perspectives on Race and Culture. And I'm pleased to say that at least 3 or 4 of the people that are participating have hopefully experiences that they can share. I want this to be interactive. I want you to be able to ask questions whenever. You know, don't worry about interrupting. What else? Okay, I mentioned in the last session that I had 3 careers. You know, still trying to figure out what I'll be when I grow up. I started out as a high school teacher of French, Spanish, and English as a second language, and did that for 13 years. And then I went into law and became a family law attorney, which I hated. So I didn't stay in that for long. And then I joined the Foreign Service, made an application to the Department of State. And most people on the West Coast have no idea what Department of State is. They think you're working in Sacramento. But it is the foreign, or the diplomacy wing of our government. And I'm sure that at least a couple people there know what it is to go through the process. But I'm going to start, before I get on the subject of Mexico, which is the main thing this time, I'm going to start a little bit about doing the training to become a Foreign Service officer. You know, they start out with a written test. They did. And a lot of things have changed since I came in. They start off with a written test, which is pretty rigorous. And then after that, you have an in-person evaluation. And they do a background check, which was sort of funny for me because they ask you for 3 people that you know that know you. And then they go to those 3 people and they ask them for 3 or 4 more people that know me. And then they go to them. So pretty soon you're pretty far out. And I started getting calls from people that I hadn't seen in years saying, "Are you okay? Some white guy with a badge came asking about you." And I said, "No, it's a background check. I haven't done anything crazy so far." I spent 22 years living abroad. I spent most of my career abroad. I didn't do too much in Washington, D.C. And I'm not presenting myself as any kind of expert. You know, this is just my perspective and my experience. I want to hear some of yours as well. Okay. I came in January 1983 when President Reagan was in office. And at that time, just a little bit before that, the women's group had brought suit against the Department of State for unfair, hiring practices. So supposedly they had a new program that recognized women and minorities. It was the mid-level program. I applied for it and I was rejected. I had a law degree, an MBA. I spoke 2 languages fluently, but they said that I wasn't qualified because I didn't have enough supervisorial experience. And, like I told you, I accepted that. I came in as a junior officer. In my class of 36, there were 5 minorities, 1 Japanese American, 1 Mexican American, 1 Black man, and 2 women. The other woman was June Carter Perry, who was ultimately qualified. She also had been rejected for the mid-level. the 6 women who had been accepted, none of them had our qualifications. All of them had worked in President Reagan's campaign. So that was my first jolt of reality. And you couldn't change once you accepted being a junior officer. When I came in, what was I going to say? Before getting into today's topic, I want to tell you a little bit about what you learned as a diplomat when you go to that first class. They gave us an orientation about how the State Department functions, how it deals with other agencies like the Department of Transportation, and the Foreign Affairs, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA. And I'm going to stop right now. How many of you know what the NSA is? 2 people. What about for the rest of you? Most people don't have any idea that the National Security Agency has the biggest budget. They're the ones that control all the satellites, the security arm. And most Americans don't even know what it is. So they haven't heard of the NSA. It's still very much functioning, especially now, with all the things happening. So if you're interested, you should go online and learn a little bit about it. They're like, something for the CIA or they had much more power. At the time I came in, they had almost 20 times the budget of the CIA. They control all of the satellites, all the American satellites. They hire more foreign language interpreters than any other country or private entity. And so they're quite powerful, quite important. They're the ones that can look into your house, through your cement or whatever. They have a lot of power. Also, at the time I came in, there were 4 specialties. Now I think that there's 5, but it was political officer, an economic officer, an administrative person, or a consulate person. The political people analyze the politics of the country, the host country, and advise on what the U.S. what position we should take on various issues, and try to forecast what would be happening in that country, which is especially relevant right now in Ukraine. It's interesting to see that the Ukrainian president, the lobbyists, are saying they're not going to attack. Everything's fine. They would show you on television that people were worried about their businesses. So political officers, who knows what they were telling, behind the scenes, but they're important. The econ officers are the same, basically similar to the political officers, but they do all of the financial analysis and the various things that affect inflation and how it's going to relate to the United States. The admin officers, the management officers now, they changed a lot of them. They're the ones that run the whole embassy. All the hiring and firing of local people, the chauffeurs, the leasing of housing, everything that it takes, procurement, shipping, storage of furniture, etc. And the consular officers are the ones that decide on who comes into the United States. The visas for both tourism and for immigration. They also do American services. The Americans that travel abroad or that live abroad, if they get into trouble, they lose their passport, if they get ill, their phone, if they, a multitude of things that help American citizens. Well, they told us that there was no hierarchy, but that was not true. When I came in, the political and the econ officers were considered the elite, and the counselor and the admin were sort of on the bottom. So what do you think the 5 officers and 5 minorities were? They were assigned to counseling. Surprise, surprise. All of the officers had to do at least 1 or 2 tours in counseling just to, just to be familiar with it. After that, they went to their specialties. Okay, all of us who claim to have foreign language capabilities had to be tested once we were accepted in. Once we're in, we have full clearance. We have top secret clearance. You had to take a test, a written test and an oral test to prove, whether you really could speak the language that you claim to read and write it. The oral part of it, when I came in, was a committee of 3 people, of which at least 1 was a native speaker. And they graded you from 0 to 5, 5 being the highest. There were 2 people, 1 person in my joining class was a lady from Tennessee. And we had talked, and I told her I was a French major and a Spanish minor, and she was a Spanish major and a French minor. And both of us had taught. But our class of 36 had the highest scores in language for the last 30 years. A lot of them were foreign service grads, as we call it. They grew up in different countries. And some of them spoke 4 or 5 languages. Some of them difficult languages like Amharic or Arabic. We had one that was fluent in Chinese, another in Japanese. So after you were tested, they posted your scores. And fortunately, mine came out high. I had a 4+ and a 4 in French and 3+ in Spanish. And the other girl that I mentioned, she had exactly the same scores, but reversed because she was a Spanish speaker. And so we're all, the things are posted. So we're all there looking at the scores. And she said with her southern accent, "Well, congratulations, Judy Francis." And I said, "Congratulations to you, Kathy." And she said, "Well, how did you do it?" And she's standing next to a guy who scored in 4 different languages, one of which was Chinese. And I said, "Well, how did you do it?" She said, "No, really, really." And so I looked at her and said, "I cheated." And she said, "What? How?" And some of the others had gotten the number a little bit worried. And I said, "I doesn't know. I just done it." And she said, "I didn't get it like that." Oh, and walked away, how the heck did you read it? Especially in that class, maybe in another class it would stood out more. So unfortunately, sometimes my personality gets in the way of seriousness. The other thing that was memorable about that class is that we had this briefing from the CIA, and they, told us the ins and outs of the relationship with the State Department, and they also said that this is the first year that we are divulging to the State Department officers who is really CIA. And they made a big deal of it, and they said, "Okay, you have one person in the class," and we said, "Would the CIA representative please stand up?" And this guy stood up, And so jokingly, I said to the guy next to me, I said, "They're probably still lying. There's probably at least another one here that they're not telling us about." And so he said, "Well, if you were to guess, who would you say?" And jokingly, I said, "The creepy guy that sits next to me in alphabetical order, Ed Howard." Well, can you pull up the picture? Not only did I turn out to be right, but he turned out to be a double agent and the spy who got away.
Is there, let's see.
There it is.
Okay, so, but I need to share it with the group as well, so.
And this guy turned out to be a double agent working for the Soviet Union. He actually caused the loss of 5 lives. So he revealed some secret information about who was working for us in the Soviet Union.
Wow.
he used what they taught him to get away. And he did, he escaped. And then later on, this book came out about him, the spy who got away. So that was sort of more than sobering when it happened. That was my first year with the State Department. And yeah, and I said, oh, I hadn't really thought about all the stuff that you could be involved in. So, they came around and interviewed all of the people who were in that class after it was known, because he was on the FBI top 10 wanted list. Wow. And one of the officers interviewed me, he said, well, I hear you predicted that he was CIA. I said, really? I was just kidding. I was joking, and I knew nothing about him. But those two things sort of gave me an idea of some of the things I would be involved with or looking into.
They're asking if you can speak just a little louder.
Louder?
Just a little.
Okay, I'll use my PE voice. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the first person from our class, because you had your training in your individual specialties, and then language if you needed it. But there were a few of us that didn't need the language. So the first person was sent to Beirut at a time when it was quite dangerous. And in April of 1983, the year that I joined, 10 days after he got to post, they blew up our embassy. And it was on April 18th, 1983. A suicide bomber driving a van devastated the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, killing 63 people, including 17 Americans. Now, the counselor section is always a section that's in the front of the embassy. Whenever there's a problem, they get the worst of it. Fortunately for him, he had gone to the bathroom. It took out the whole counselor section, and had he not made that bathroom run, he would have been dead. So it was not all fun and games. There were some things that were. I was the second person to be sent out, but I was sent to Mexico City at a time when it was much less dangerous than that. It was really a great experience for me. When I got there, is it okay? Okay, when I got there, they put me in a hotel first, and then I was expecting the embassy to tell me where my permanent residence would be. When I went to the housing office, they said, this is your budget, go find a place. And I was like, are they serious? I know nothing about the city. It's one thing visiting there. I visited the years before. But so I went and found a real estate agent. Well, what I didn't realize is that just before my arrival, they had a devaluation, a very serious devaluation in 1984. And the State Department had not yet adjusted its budget. So when they gave me my allowance, I took it to the real estate. Oh, you won't have any problem finding a place. And she started showing me all of these elegant apartments. I mean, really, I would never live in an apartment like that again. But if the lady had done her job in the housing section, I would never been able to live there. They hadn't told us that it's not just your budget, but the square footage depended on your rank, a lot of things. And this was a huge 3-bedroom in a really nice area. And I loved it, but it gave me sort of a false idea of what the rest of my tour would be like for the housing. But it was in an area that caused me my first surprise in Mexico. One of the first things I saw on the way to my place was a synagogue, a Jewish synagogue. And I said, oh. to actually have a synagogue here, you know. And I later met some of the people, and they were like 6th generation Mexicans. You know, some of them were a lot more European looking, but culturally and every other way, they were as Mexican as any Mexican. You know, so I started thinking, you know, gosh, we started to have a stereotype of the U.S. And then I started seeing Asian Mexicans and others, you know, and saying, maybe here I used to teach Spanish from a textbook called El Camino de Arte, and I thought that it included cultural things, but you know, there was so much that I learned about the real Mexico that was not in those books. I guess that should surprise anybody either. When I first got there, though, at the airport, first of all, I should back up and say that there was a lot of tension between the U.S. and Mexico at the time. And Reagan had appointed another actor as the ambassador, which the Mexicans took as sort of a slap in the face. John Gavin was his name. You know, some of you might have, I think he was in sitcoms or whatever. And I got to the airport, and there was somebody from the embassy to meet me. And the inspector said, I have to open your bag. Well, that was against the Vienna Convention. They were not supposed to inspect the bags of diplomats. And the person who came to meet me had the book in her hand. She knew that there were conflicts. She was about to go in the back. So I said, well, you know, you're really not supposed to, but I have nothing to hide, so please, you have my permission. And you could see that, then I said it to him in Spanish, you could see the look on his face, you know, his whole attitude changed. And so he opened it, okay. You know? And I realized that I was dealing with both the male ego, the desire to be in charge, but also the conflict that was, you know, the tension between the countries. I said, you know, I'm just going to handle it in a different way. And that served me well throughout Mexico. I had to do prison visits for American prisoners. Again, they didn't give me any preparation. They just said, here's the prison you go to, and here's a list of the American prisoners up there. You know, interview them and on this sheet and come back. And I said, is there a car for me? They said, no, get a taxi. So I did. And I found out that just by pure error, I had worn the right color, because you can't wear the same color as the prisoners. They don't give them uniforms, nor do they give them food, family food. And I was not in conflict with the color, just by accident. I go out there and by the way, this particular prison, the prison director hates Americans. Okay. So he had me wait outside of his office for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And then he called me and he was very gruff. And I said, oh, I know a man as important as you. It's okay. I don't mind waiting. I know you have very important things to do. Yes. He said, do you have Mexican relatives? I said, no. He said, well, your Spanish is good. I said, thank you. I said, I've always enjoyed speaking Spanish and learning. And then we chatted, and you could see his attitude changing. And then when I gave him my list, he said, oh, you're missing two. And he added him to the list. And the embassy couldn't believe it when I got back. I said, oh, he was just so pleasant. But it's especially, you know, if you know how to work it, it really does help to look at, you know, the situation, the person, and say, how do I get what I need? You know? So, okay, I mentioned about the housing valuation. The area that I lived in was called Polanco, and it was really, really a beautiful area. like I said, the diversity just amazed me because I wasn't, I was ignorant, period. One day when I was working in the embassy in the American Services section, a young Black woman came in and she said, it was for some documentation that we had to help her with. And we started chatting, and she was from Harvard doing her doctoral dissertation, working on it. And her subject was the Black diaspora. And I said, well, what are you doing here? She said, well, there's a sizable Black population here. And I said, well, do they admit it? Admit it, or a lot of us have that kind of belief. And she said, not only that, they've been really fighting to be recognized as such. And she said, the village I'm going to is just 30 miles east of Acapulco. And the people there are Black, Black people, majority Black. And the belief is that generations ago, they were bringing a slave ship to the West Coast, and they took it over, mutinied, killed the slave masters or whatever they called it, and landed there and founded this village. And with them, there's been some intermarriage, but not a whole lot. So I was really curious. I was, my gosh, I didn't know about Black folks in Mexico. I knew that there were some that looked like they had Black blood or whatever, but not necessarily acknowledging. Well, it turns out that they have been trying to be recognized as such for some time. And it made clear for me why a lot of Mexicans, when I go into a store here and say two people in front of me speak Spanish with a cashier and I'll come up and speak Spanish, and then they'll switch to English. And it's not because of my accent, it's because of my color. And a couple of times I called them on it and said, she's smoking. And I said, are you from, they always say Dominican Republic. And I said, no, it doesn't matter, you switch right away. Well, in Mexico, that never happened. They would ask me if I was from the state of Guerrero or Veracruz or Oaxaca. And so this lady that's doing her dissertation told me that's where the major populations are. And she's gone now. There's a map that she's going to show when she comes back. And then, a few months later, I got to go to Acapulco and actually see the village. All I had to do was ask a taxi driver, do you know of a village that was Black? He said, oh, yeah, I can take you there. And he did, and I spoke to some of the people. I mean, it was fascinating. Most of them didn't speak English. They, of course, after 5 generations, they're Spanish speaking only. But they talked about, African ancestors and the stories they had been told. And so it was it was just, once again, you think you know things and turns out that you know less than you thought you knew. But it's a matter of keeping an open mind and trying to learn. So I tried to travel as much as I could. My 2 sons were with me, and they were 14 and 12 at the time. So we traveled around Mexico. I decided to go to Veracruz because I heard, there were a lot of Black people there. And one of the first things I saw in the city of Veracruz was this huge statue. Okay, I need you for two right now. Do you have the one would be the map? Mm-hmm. I think it should be. Yeah, there we go. Okay, this is the part.
Switch back. I gotta bring it back up for them as well. Okay.
Okay. So these are the areas Guerrero, Oaxaca, and Veracruz, that they have large Black populations in Mexico. And more they've been activists and tried to be recognized as such. Then, okay, the next one is Gasparianga, the statue. Okay, this is what I saw as soon as I wanted to, and I said, what? Yeah, what's this about? So I went to the museum and found out that he was an escaped slave who organized other escaped slaves in the rooms, came back down and conquered the village, the city of Veracruz with the conquistadores. And so, and he's seen as a hero, and he's acknowledged as such. Yeah, young guy. And they named a city after him as well. But his, oh, I don't know why the A is left out there. That's, if you ever look him up on internet, it's Gasparianga.
Can you see the bottom? Oh, you can't see the bottom of it, huh?
No,
Yeah, Sorry
I
about
probably
that.
screwed
Yeah.
that up.
that's okay.
Okay.
You need it, so should I take it out?
Yeah, you can take it down. So just to bring you up to date, like I said, like a lot of Americans, I thought that, people just didn't want to acknowledge it. But it turns out in 1925, a prominent Mexican politician and philosopher named Jose Vasconcelos promoted Mexican unity, and he didn't want everything broken down by race. And so he encouraged the concept of cosmic race, raza cósmica, saying that all Mexicans are a mixture of various races, a blended race. But nevertheless, not surprisingly, both the indigenous and Afro-Mexicans represent the most discriminated group in Mexico. And it wasn't until 1992, I think it was, yeah, that they started what they call the Third Root Program, which is just fascinating, where they actually acknowledged the existence of a sizable population of Blacks or those of Black heritage, Afro-Mexicans, and started dealing with issues concerning them. In 1999, they officially recognized Afro-Mexicans as a significant entity, and programs were established that directly addressed their existence and needs. A dedicated group of Afro-Mexicans founded the first annual gathering of Black communities throughout Mexico. It remains an annual event where they highlight all the contributions of Afro-Mexicans to dance, to music, to different kinds of studies, in quite a few areas. In 2001, the Mexican Congress granted autonomy and self-determination to both the indigenous people of Mexico and Afro-Mexicans. But it wasn't until 2015 that they were put in the census survey, pre-census survey as a minority. And they established the Bureau of Afro-Mexican Affairs in Oaxaca. And, so now it took a long time. Fortunately, I mean, the reason behind the slowness of identifying them as a group was because they were trying to establish unity and say that they were all mixed race. But the result of it, as in the United States, is that they're the most underprivileged group, along with Native Americans. Okay, and how many of you were aware of Afro-Mexicans that are activists trying to establish it? Okay, somebody is. Anybody else? Most people are not. So I'd like to give some of your reactions and feedback. Is there something on the screen, some chat?
Not actually, no, it's just a conversation.
Okay, okay. So no reactions, no.
In Mexico. Other than what you're explaining,
Racism?
day-to-day,
No, most of them, I experienced more anti-American things than they knew I was. But usually they would look at me and say, "Viva Cuba!" So that won't give me a promotion in the American embassy for that. But no, I really never did.
You stated that as a junior, you were still a junior.
Junior officer. Uh-huh.
Is that the first?
Well, I didn't have a choice. I knew I was, matter of fact, I won a vet in my class because they assign you to your first, you give them what your preferences are. But you didn't really have a say in it, in that for your first tour. And they needed, how many, they needed something like 10 or 12 officers in Mexico, in either both the embassy and all of the consulates. Oh, by the way, do most of you know what the difference between an embassy and a consulate is?
Consulate, they don't have a formal building to go to.
No. The easiest way, the embassy is always in the capital. You know, it's always in the capital. They're dealing with the president of the nation and all that. The consulates are in different places, and they usually do have their own buildings.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, okay. The question was, do you know the difference between an embassy and a consulate? Because Mexico has, every country has, not every country, but the countries where we're represented has one embassy. But in Mexico, I think we have 6 or 7 consulates. And I said the answer to that is the embassy is always in the capital because they're dealing directly with the president and the Congress and you know all the administrative people. The consulate, you know, normally our consulates have buildings. I think you're thinking of the honorary consulates that we have, like Brazil and Los Angeles has an honorary consul, and sometimes that's a local person. I mean, you know, a Brazilian who lives here probably has money, contacts, and can do certain things on behalf of the government, but is not necessarily a foreign service officer or a diplomat.
Because I know that for the French, they have a
Consulate, the French consulate,
but they don't have embassy.
right.
Yeah.
So, are there any questions or any reactions at all?
So, I've been, hearing about Afro-Mexican. They've done news stories on
More recently, yeah.
But here lately, we just haven't, hearing nothing almost. And I'm just wondering, it fell through the cracks.
I don't know. The question was that she said she's been hearing about Afro-Mexicans for some time, but lately less so. And she was asking if it fell through the cracks or whatever. That I don't know. I know that there's a big difference in the attitudes. I'm going to get myself in trouble now, but I'm going to say it anyway. In the attitudes of a lot of Latino Americans that live here, that grew up here. It's like a competition rather than a unity in many cases. But I think that has more to do with American society than it does, from Mexico, because I tell you, I mean, I really traveled a lot in Mexico, not with any tour group, just going to places and meeting people, and I just have not seen that attitude there. When I was working, she was dark skinned.
The Mexicans would say, oh, she's not African, she's Cuban, or she's Mexican. And then in some cases, they wouldn't talk to her, they wouldn't speak Spanish.
Okay, let me at least say that so the rest of, she said that she worked with still work with her?
No.
Oh, and she previously worked with a Cuban. And she said the attitude toward, tell me if I'm saying it wrong, the attitude toward her was that she was not, I guess, really fully Latino. You know, and yeah, I've seen that attitude. But especially in the West Coast. When I've gone to New York and to even Florida, it depends, there's an age difference because a lot of the Cubans in Florida, the older people
Or white.
were the ones that were in charge and had property and everything, and Castro took it away from them, and he really promoted the situation for Blacks. So a lot of the older Cubans in Florida have a much more conservative.
When they came into the country, they came into like Minnesota.
You mean the Cubans? They came in all over. The majority of them went to Florida.
But these people came in Minnesota, and she said they didn't speak anything but she really had a hard time.
You mean the Cubans?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe it was later. You know, because even, I don't know if you remember, even the, in the State Department, there was this one security guy that had a T-shirt. Everybody can get it, but it said, it like scorecard, Haitian 0, Ocean 100, you know, something like that. And they treated the refugees from Haiti so differently than the ones from Cuba because they, you know, it was anti-Castro. But this country has the most unique attitudes toward race. Unique is a good word. Yes, unique is a good word, right? Yeah, the most unique attitudes toward race. Do you have a question?
No, we have a question.
Okay.
From Elaine Godfrey.
Okay, let's hear it.
Elaine Godfrey, you can feel free to unmute.
Okay, Judy, I have a question. Now, we have some timeshares in Mexico, and this is the first time I'm hearing about the Afro-Mexicans. If we want to go visit some of these different timeshares, what area would you think would be the best area to go to? And also to get a little more history on Black people in Mexico.
Well, where is your timeshare?
It's a number of timeshares, kind of scattered all over, but you know, from Puerto Vallarta on the west coast all the way down south towards Acapulco. But
Acapulco area is the biggest area.
Okay.
Oaxaca and Guerrero.
Okay.
And I mean, you could just give, I got into a taxi and asked me, do you know where the closest Black village is? And you took me right to it.
Okay.
I mean, seriously, it sounds funny, but you know, they know, especially the ones that are predominantly Black, and Oaxaca has the largest Black population. You can even go online and they have some of the statistics. But they're the most active. I mentioned that Oaxaca has. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
We're over here.
Oaxaca has the biggest number of Afro-Cubans, and they also have actually a legitimate government established entity that's called, I think it's called Afro-Cuban Affairs or something like that. So that would be the easiest, and like I said, that's right. It's near Acapulco.
Okay, thank you.
And can I ask something, please?
Go
Hello?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go,
Oh.
go, Sandy.
Okay, thank you. Was that student by any chance, was it Tony Humber who was doing the research or someone else?
I can't remember, and you know, at the time it was just sort of an offhand conversation, and that was in 1983. You know, 83.
Okay, because there's a woman here, a longtime friend of mine, who's done extensive research on Afro Mexicans, and her name is Tony Humber.
It might well have been. Yeah.
And there's also another man, I don't know his name. He had a book. He was a photographer, and he's had pictures at the California African American Museum of Afro Afro Mexicans
Oh, okay, hold on just a
and
second.
African Mexicans also.
Okay.
Soldier, the name of the photographer, the name of the photographer is now deceased, is Tony Mathis. Tony Mathis.
I can't hear you.
Okay, she said the name of the photographer, it was now deceased, is Tony Mathis, the photographer you're referring to. Could you hear me?
Right. Okay. Yes, I can hear you. But when the people are, the students in the back, when they talk, it's hard. I can't understand them anyway. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
The LA Times did a spread on him.
The LA Times did a spread on him.
Right, right.
Okay. Yeah, he attended the same church as
Oh, okay.
And you know, so she knew him.
Yeah, well, I know when I went to Acapulco, and I've only been once, and this was many, many years ago, I saw people browner than me.
Yeah. But one interesting thing that I think I mentioned in the first session is that, you know, the US doesn't go just on color. Because I've seen East Indians that are way, way darker.
Oh, yeah.
They're not considered black. You know, but yet people that of mixed heritage, because we go by the one drop rule that no place else in the world goes by, they're considered black. You know, so the whole idea of race and culture for me has been fascinating as you travel the world.
Yes, it's strange. And then when very fair people go to Africa and they're called white, they're insulted.
Yeah.
But they're more white than they are black.
I'm definitely gonna get into that. I think it's the section, not the next one after that, but I will mention now that the first time when I was in Ghana and I went to remote villages, they would say, and not just fair people, because I am not fair. I'm sorry, I keep looking at the screen. They would say, "Hi, white lady." And I said, I come to Africa to find out I'm white, but I'm going to get more into that because I ran into that in so many different countries, in so many different situations that I came up with a whole different idea of what it is in Africa. I'll tell you, for me, it's cultural, not color. And they define a white by anything that's not of African culture. They can, in Ghana, they called the Japanese ambassador, a woman who, you know, was very involved in their community. And they said, "Oh, she's such a nice white lady." You know?
Yeah,
But
the same thing happened to me in Ghana. I was called white, but I think it means, as you say, foreigner.
yeah,
Someone who's not from there. And in fact, one of the when it happened to me, the person was corrected and they were told, "Oh, she's not white."
yeah. I know. Well, I'm definitely
Equivalent to Westerner.
On a future thing, but my ex-husband, my second ex-husband, I married him in France, in Paris. He had been living here for 5 years, no, 11 years. You know, it was legal, working there, the whole thing. But he was from Togo. And there was a Peace Corps volunteer, a Black young man that came into the embassy. We started chatting and turned out that he spent his 2 years in Togo. And so I invited him to our house to dinner to meet my husband. And he was saying, did you learn any Mina, their local language? And he said, yeah, I didn't get real fluent. He said, but they always called me Yovo. And my husband said, you didn't learn much because that means white man, He said, and this young man was very dark. He was darker than my husband. He said, they couldn't have called you Yovo. And he said, they always did, Years later, when we stopped in Cote d'Ivoire before going to my first African tour. And to visit his sister. And she had moved. So I said, what are we gonna do? He said, it's easy. I'm just gonna go to the Togolese section of Abidjan and ask. And that's what he did. But there were some kids playing and they saw him and they said, yo vote. And of course I got a great, and I said, you're in a European suit, the way you act is different, that's what I said, it's cultural. He said, but that means, I said, maybe it meant white at your time. It's like growing up here, if you said gay, it was happy. You don't go around now telling people unless you mean it, I'm so gay. So language evolves. Okay, is there anything else?
Former friends of their Brenda, Marion, and we can have her tell a little bit about her experiences, because she's had some very similar.
Okay, but Delina wants to hear from her friend Brenda. Marion, can you tell us about some of your experiences?
White, in different countries. But when I was in Gabon, because my hair was cut almost like a baldy, the Gabonese would call me African. And then in South Africa, I've been colored.
Yes.
So it varies from place to place, because when I said I was Black in South Africa, they said, no, you cannot be Black because you don't speak one of our languages and you're not part of one of our ethnic groups. So you are not Black, you are colored. So it varied from country to country, in Benin, I was white, And then I was in Senegal once and I got into the suicide seat in the taxi. As you know, that's right next to the driver. And they said, oh my God, nothing is sacred. The white woman is taking the suicide seat. And I turned around and I said, well, where is the white woman in this taxi? I want to know where she is. So that's some of my stories.
Yeah, that for me, South Africa, they had specific definitions of
Yes.
white, colored, and Black. And one of the trivia questions I like to ask people is, in South Africa, the mixed race, the Chinese and the Indians were all colored. The Japanese were honorary whites.
Right.
Can you figure out why that was?
Money.
And so throughout the world, when the British Empire, when slavery was abolished, they brought in Indians and Chinese in Jamaica and even in different places as laborers. They built the railroads, they built,
Brazil.
roads. Brazil, the same thing. Well, they weren't in charge of Brazil, they were the Portuguese. But a few places in like Mexico, they had the second largest slave population in the world, African slaves. And then they changed that out and they used Indian labor, killed off a lot. But anyway, the Japanese in South Africa came in as investors, whereas the Indians and the Chinese came in as laborers.
Indigent laborers.
So it was indentured laborers. And there were, it was a class thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
But a funny thing in Paris, we were at a party where it was very international. And this South African guy asked an American girl to dance, and he's dancing with her and talking, and he says, where are you from? And she says, the United States. He said, oh, he said, you're colored. And she says, I'm not colored. He said, I can look at you and tell you're colored.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so we intervened and said, no, for them, colored means you have mixture. You know, he's not calling you, it's not like calling you Uncle Tom or that's the way
Right.
she was taking it. I'm black, you know. He said, you're not black, I can see that.
Mhm.
I heard that thing about the Japanese. Trevor Noah's book.
Oh, does he get,
Talks about the Japanese being white and that, them being treated better than anybody, you know? And they would ask, you know, if they saw an Asian person, they would ask them if they were Japanese or Chinese.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, They treated the Japanese.
They were in two different categories, and people
Yes.
could petition to be in it, like a black person that was mixed could petition to be considered a color. And once they proved that they had the mixture, they were recategorized as color. I mean, theirs was so cut and dry. You know, but in America, you couldn't even petition. I mean, not that we were going to anymore, but you know, the slave masters set that up because they could extend their slavery holdings.
Judy,
But I
South,
think it's that. Yes,
Judy, Judy, in South Africa, what do they consider Koreans? What are they?
that I don't know. I don't think before, you know, back in the time of apartheid, they had many Koreans.
Yeah.
I know now they have a lot of business from Korea. I know that.
Yeah, but now supposedly those designations are gone.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so they weren't officially classified as
That's
anything.
right, yeah.
Well, thank you for participating, and we have, like I said, we have people in this group that have just as much as experience, and I would love for you, if you come back next week, to share some of that with us. Like Margaret, yeah, Margaret was high up in the echelon. In the State Department or living abroad? Well, then she had more than that living abroad because she was the director of the Peace Corps when I met her. And she was living, we met in, Margaret? Is Margaret there still? Is she muted or?
I can only ask.
Yeah,
Margaret, are you there?
she might have stepped away. Okay, well, we'll get her next week. If she's there. Yeah, because Margaret, you know, she has such an interesting past too. And I bet because she was married, you know, to a Senegalese, that she got a different kind of exposure too. Because if there's one thing I can thank Teo about, is once we did move to Africa, my experience was so different from the other people. And that was thanks to him. And we're still friends. Okay, well, because she was the Peace Corps director. Yeah. And then, yeah, after he did, right? He worked for me. I had to talk him into it because he was so good in computers and everything, and I needed somebody in my section. And then I said, why don't you try out for the Foreign Service? You know, he said, oh. And then finally he did. Of course, he aced the exam. And he became a Foreign Service officer before she was. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you.
So next week?
Next week. Yeah, we on the 8th, we'll have one more on the 8th, and then after that, it'll be every 2 weeks. We did it 3 weeks in a row because I was in Costa Rica and I came back on just unable to do anything. So, and thanks to Anissa and what's your name again? Delana. Hey, you know, she was my student.
Judy,
Yeah,
Judy, next week, what are you gonna be talking about next week?
good question. Oh, Paris, my second assignment was in Paris.
Yes. Okay.
And I was telling them, because there I was married to Louise, my experience was, I keep forgetting. Yeah, my experience was a lot different because, most of the time I was hanging with Africans and Caribbeans and saw, the only nightclubs and things I went to were all African.
Mhm.
And, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Paris. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
And
Uh-huh.
let's
Okay.
try to make sure we got the right stuff on there. Remove
Oh,
spotlight.
yeah, and
Okay.
this, will they be able to access the video if they want to?
This was not live streamed, but if we need to, I can pull a recording, but right now it's not publicly accessible.
Okay.
And I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Let's
Okay.
see.